What if I told you that the greatest heist in human history wasn't for gold, diamonds, or cash? What if I told you it wasn't committed by a gang of criminals in masks, but by the United States government itself? Imagine a heist so complex, so expensive, and so dangerous that it required building a ship the size of a football field, inventing technology that didn't exist, and creating a fake mining company led by the world's most eccentric billionaire just to hide the truth. The target? A 2,000-ton Soviet monster lying 3 miles deep at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, armed with nuclear missiles capable of wiping out the American West Coast. For 6 years, the CIA ran this operation in total silence. They gambled 800 million taxpayer dollars on a mechanical claw that might not work. They risked starting World War III. And the craziest part? They almost got away with it. This is the story of Project Azorian, the day the CIA tried to steal a submarine from the ocean floor. Welcome to History's Echo. We dive deep into the archives to recover the stories that were redacted, buried, and forgotten. Here, history isn't just dates and names. It's a warning, a lesson, and a thriller. If you want to know what really happens in the shadows of power, subscribe now. Let's open the file. The vanishing of K-129. The story begins not in Washington, but in the freezing waters of the North Pacific. It is February 1968. The Cold War is at its absolute freezing point. A Soviet submarine, known as K-129, slips quietly out of its base on the Kamchatka Peninsula. It is a Golf II class ballistic missile submarine, a predator of the deep. On board are 98 sailors and officers. But more importantly, inside its silos are 3 R-21 nuclear missiles, each carrying a 1-megaton warhead. Enough power to turn San Francisco or Los Angeles into radioactive ash. The K-129 checks in with its command post as scheduled. Then silence. Days turn into weeks. The submarine misses its second check-in, then its third. Panic begins to set in at the Soviet naval headquarters. A submarine with nuclear weapons has simply vanished from the face of the Earth. By mid-March, the Soviet Navy launches a massive search operation. It is unprecedented. Dozens of ships, submarines, and aircraft scour the Pacific Ocean. They are desperate, they are frantic. But the ocean is vast, and finding a silent metal tube in millions of square miles of water is harder than finding a needle in a haystack. After months of searching, the Soviets give up. They assume the sub is lost forever, swallowed by the abyss. They declare the crew dead and return to port, defeated. But they made one critical mistake. They assumed that if they couldn't hear the sub sink, no one else could. The sound of doom. While the Soviets were blindly searching the surface, the United States was listening to the deep. During the Cold War, the U.S. Air Force and Navy had developed a top-secret system called SOSUS, Sound Surveillance System. It was a network of hydrophones, underwater microphones, placed on the ocean floor to track Soviet submarines. It was the most sensitive listening device ever created. When the U.S. intelligence analysts looked back at their acoustic data from March 1968, they found something terrifying. A singular, catastrophic event. A low-frequency bang followed by the sound of crushing metal. By triangulating the data from different hydrophones, they pinpointed the exact location of the explosion. It was 1,560 miles northwest of Hawaii. The Americans knew something the Russians didn't. The K-129 hadn't just disappeared. It had suffered a catastrophic internal explosion and sunk straight to the bottom. The U.S. Navy sent a submarine, the USS Halibut, to the coordinates. The Halibut was equipped with special deep-sea cameras. They lowered the cameras 3 miles down, 6,500 feet into the crushing darkness. And there, in the beam of the searchlight, they saw it. The wreckage of K-129. It was lying on its starboard side, a tomb of steel, but the cameras revealed something else. The missile silos were intact. The codebooks might still be safe. The nuclear torpedoes were there. It was the greatest intelligence treasure trove in history, sitting unguarded on the ocean floor. The impossible mission. The photos from the USS Halibut reached the desk of President Richard Nixon and his national security advisor, Henry Kissinger. The CIA realized the magnitude of the opportunity. If they could recover the submarine, they wouldn't just get the nuclear missiles, they would get the Soviet cryptographic machines, the code books. It would allow the US to read every secret message the Soviet Navy sent. It would tip the balance of the Cold War decisively in America's favor. But there was a problem, a physics problem. The submarine was lying at a depth of 16,500 feet. To put that in perspective, the Titanic lies at 12,500 feet. The pressure down there is immense, over 7,000 pounds per square inch. No ship in existence could lift a 2,000-ton object from that depth. The steel cables would snap under their own weight. The object would break apart. The CIA engineers looked at the problem and said, "It's impossible." But the CIA director said, "Do it anyway." They formed a special task force. The project was given the code name Azorian. The budget was effectively unlimited. They decided they needed to build a ship that had never been built before. A ship with a giant claw that could reach down 3 miles and pluck the submarine from the mud like a prize in an arcade game. Enter the billionaire building. A giant futuristic ship takes time. It takes shipyards. It takes thousands of workers. You can't just build it in secret. The Soviet satellites would see it. The media would ask questions. Why is the CIA building a massive ship? The cover story had to be perfect. It had to be so big, so crazy, and so expensive that no one would question it. The CIA needed a frontman, someone who was known for being rich, eccentric, and obsessed with secretive technology. They needed Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes was the Elon Musk of his day, but far more reclusive. He was a billionaire aviator, engineer, and movie producer who had locked himself away in a penthouse in Las Vegas. The CIA approached Hughes's company, Global Marine. They pitched the idea. "We need you to pretend this is your ship. We need you to tell the world you're going to mine the ocean floor for manganese nodules. Manganese nodules are potato-sized rocks on the ocean floor that contain valuable metals." It was a plausible story. Everyone knew Hughes was crazy enough to try to vacuum the ocean floor for rocks. Hughes agreed. He gave the CIA his name, his company, and his cover. The Hughes Glomar Explorer was born. The Glomar Explorer construction began in Pennsylvania. The ship was a monster. It was 618 feet long. It had a massive derrick tower in the center that looked like an oil rig. But the real secret was inside. The ship had a moon pool, a giant sliding door in the bottom of the hull. This allowed the claw, which they called Clementine, to be lowered into the ocean secretly, underwater, without anyone seeing it from the outside. The engineering was decades ahead of its time. The ship had to hold a perfectly stationary position over a specific spot in the ocean, while waves crashed against it and currents pushed it. They invented a dynamic positioning system using thrusters and satellite navigation, technology that is standard today but was science fiction in 1972. Inside the ship, it was like a James Bond villain's lair. There were secure teletype rooms, encrypted radios, and a crew that was vetted by the CIA. The workers thought they were working for Howard Hughes on a mining ship. Only a handful of people at the very top knew they were actually building a grave robber. The cover story in the media circus. The CIA didn't just build a ship, they built a fake industry. They released press releases about the wonders of ocean mining. They hired actors to play executives. They even gave interviews to magazines detailing how Howard Hughes was going to corner the market on manganese. The media ate it up. The public was fascinated by Hughes's latest gamble. While the engineers were testing the giant hydraulic claw that would grab the nuclear sub, the newspapers were writing articles about the future of underwater mining. It was the perfect illusion. The Soviets read these articles too. Their spies reported back to Moscow. "It's just that crazy American billionaire again. He's looking for rocks." The Soviet Navy, which still had no idea where their sub was, didn't bother to investigate the strange new ship closely. Setting sail into the unknown summer 1974. The Glomar Explorer is ready. It sails from Long Beach, California toward the target site in the North Pacific. The mood on board is tense. They are sailing into international waters, but they are going to steal the sovereign property of the Soviet Union. Technically, this is an act of war. If the Soviets catch them in the act, they could be torpedoed. President Nixon has just authorized the mission, but as the ship sails, Nixon is embroiled in the Watergate scandal. The government is shaky. The CIA is nervous. The ship arrives at the coordinates. The crew engages the thrusters. The massive doors of the moon pool open beneath the ship. The capture vehicle, Clementine, is essentially a giant set of steel jaws hanging from miles of pipe. Section by section, pipe by pipe, they begin to lower the claw into the abyss. It takes days to reach the bottom. It is a slow, agonizing descent into darkness. The Soviet shadow. Just as the operation begins, a Soviet naval tugboat appears on the horizon. Then a Soviet missile tracking ship. The CIA crew freezes. Have they been caught? The Soviet ships circle the Glomar Explorer. They signal, asking what the Americans are doing. The Glomar Explorer responds, sticking to the cover story. We are conducting mining tests. The Soviet helicopter flies over the ship, taking photos. The CIA agents on deck hide inside. They make the crew stand on deck and wave, acting like bored miners. The Soviet captain is suspicious but confused. He sees no weapons, he sees no divers. Just a big ugly ship sitting in the middle of nowhere. After days of harassment, the Soviets eventually leave, deciding that Hughes is just wasting his money. They had no idea that directly beneath their hull, 3 miles down, the Americans were latching onto the corpse of their fallen comrades. The claw descends. The claw reaches the bottom. The camera feeds show the K-129. It is a ghostly sight. The sub is broken, rusted, and half buried in the sediment. The claw needs to position itself perfectly around the submarine's hull. The operators on the surface are working with a 3-mile delay in physical reaction. It's like trying to pick up a pencil with a pair of chopsticks from the top of the Empire State Building. Slowly, gently, the giant steel fingers of Clementine slide under the submarine. The hydraulics engage, the claws dig in. We have capture. The strain gauges on the pipe jump. They are lifting millions of pounds. The winch begins to turn. Slowly, inch by inch, the K-129 begins to rise from its grave. It hangs suspended in the black water, swinging slightly. It is working. They are actually stealing a nuclear submarine. The break for days, the winch pulls the sub up. 16,000 feet, 12,000 feet, 8,000 feet. The crew begins to celebrate. They are going to pull off the impossible. They have the code books, the missiles, the nuclear torpedoes. Everything is coming up. Then, at about 9,000 feet from the surface, disaster strikes. The K-129 was structurally damaged from the original explosion and the crash onto the ocean floor. As the water pressure decreased during the ascent, the steel of the submarine became brittle. Suddenly, a massive shudder runs through the Glomar Explorer. Crack. Several of the claw's fingers snap. The submarine breaks in half. The larger section, the rear part containing the code room and the missiles, slides out of the claw and plummets back down into the abyss. It hits the ocean floor with a force that shatters it completely. The crew watches in horror on the monitors. They are left holding only the front section, about 38 feet of the nose of the submarine. The prize is gone. The secret exposed. They haul the remaining piece into the moon pool. It contains the bodies of 6 Soviet sailors. They perform a formal burial at sea for them, playing the Soviet national anthem and throwing wreaths into the water. The CIA realizes they have failed to get the code books. They have failed to get the missiles. They have spent $800 million for 38 feet of twisted metal and 6 ghosts. But the story wasn't over. The CIA had hired a real burglary team to break into Howard Hughes' office in Las Vegas to steal documents that would prove he was not connected to the CIA. But the burglars were caught. The documents were leaked to the press. In March 1975, just months after the failure, investigative journalist Seymour Hersh broke the story in the New York Times. The headline screamed, "CIA salvage ship said to raise part of sunken Soviet sub." The secret was out. The legacy. The CIA tried to suppress the story, claiming national security. They coined a phrase that is famous today. When asked about the Glomar Explorer, they said they could neither confirm nor deny the existence of such a ship or operation. This became known as the Glomar response. The Soviets were furious. They demanded answers. But the Cold War was thawing slightly, and they couldn't admit they had lost a sub in the first place without looking weak. So they stayed quiet. Today, the Glomar Explorer is mostly scrap metal. Howard Hughes died a year later, a recluse to the end. But the question remains, did they really fail? Some conspiracy theorists believe the CIA actually recovered the entire submarine and only admitted to getting a small piece to throw the Soviets off the scent. Others say the mission was a colossal waste of money that proved American ingenuity, but failed due to simple physics. Whatever the truth, Project Azorian remains the most audacious, expensive, and technically brilliant failure in the history of espionage. It proved that in the game of secrets, the only limit is your imagination and your budget. So, what do you think really happened out there in the deep blue sea? Did the CIA get the missiles and lie about it? Or is the K-129 still resting in pieces at the bottom of the Pacific, waiting for someone else to come along? Let me know your theory in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the secrets of the Cold War, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We are just getting started uncovering the history they tried to hide. I'm your host, and this is History's Echo. Until next time, remember, the truth is often stranger than fiction.